Gundam. I never thought I would get the chance to say those words on the Death of a Game series, a series where we choose a game or company and take the largest contributing factors for its failure or shutdown, and chronicle such throughout the video, all culminating in a final deduction at the end. Gundam as a franchise, or better yet, Mobile Suit Gundam, is not only one of the oldest animes, it's had a profound impact on my life and childhood. I was always attracted to the thought of high-tech mobile suits, and Gundam was that and way more. Fast forward over 20 years and I'm still a Gundam fan. However, as fans watching this know, that means that I'm basically a fan of the anime and gunplay. If you notice a lack of the word gaming, well, that's the unfortunate fate of being a Gundam fan. We don't have that many games to play, to be blunt, at least in the West. Most of the time we do get games, they get ported from the East years later, or they're done in a cash grab fashion, hence my surprise in covering the franchise. Sure, there's a couple of good Gundam games, but they never made it to the West. Being a Gundam fan who plays games is frustrating. So anytime a Gundam game comes out, most of us are gonna jump right in, and are usually let down. Gundam is a complex anime/beast, and games for Gundam have been sort of all over the place in genre and approach. But Gundam Evolution was something special, and not special at the same time. Gundam Evolution felt like the first time Bandai Namco, the publisher and developer, and key holder to the Gundam series, had done a Gundam game in a more modern approach. The not so special part came from the fact that, of all things, it ended up being a hero shooter, and a pretty good one at that. Gundam Evolution would launch in September of 2022, but within just a year, already has a shutdown date set for November in 2023. As we do, we will detail all of the major events and why to solve the case. I can't wait to cover Gundam, though it's bittersweet, as I don't want the franchise to fail nor think gaming-wise it can really take too many more of them. But let's get to the mystery. The story of Gundam Evolution begins back in the summer of 2021, with the rumors of a Gundam esports game. I never thought I would hear those two things combined, but those rumors would turn into something more tangible. Gundam Evolution, as the game was being dubbed, was a hero shooter not unlike Overwatch. Prepare for constant comparisons by choice or not, by the way. According to Forbes, it was so much like Overwatch that they were already deeming the game a disappointing Overwatch knockoff. Developed on Unreal Engine, Gundam Evolution was a 6 vs 6 shooter set to launch with 12 different mobile suits. Forbes would also state that said, Gundam Evolution feels like an unnecessary game, which felt like a harsh criticism for a game not even in closed beta yet. But on the surface, they were right. The fact that Gundam Evolution was even a hero shooter was already confusing for some, as Gundam themselves are larger scale vehicles or suits, especially when compared to the average hero in Overwatch. In order to get these to work in the right context of a hero shooter, it would mean making the Gundams play more like Overwatch characters, which felt like a strange proposition, because that meant that the less Gundam the game felt, to an extent, the better it would be a hero shooter. Contrast this with PS4's Mobile Suit Gundam Extreme VS or Versus Maxi Boost On. Forgive the name, seriously, it's night and day. Gundam Extreme VS or Versus plays like a Gundam arcade game that I played growing up at arcades. Its fast-paced physics-based gameplay and head-to-head fighting with other top pilots makes it exciting and right in your face. Sure, of course, that's where its strengths lie and end, but my point is more so that it actually felt like playing a Gundam game. So Gundam Evolution was already going to suffer from this issue before ever even launching. According to players who got the chance to play throughout the numerous betas, they were either loving how similar the game was to Overwatch and how strangely good it was, and different at some aspects, or hating the fact that it felt nothing like an actual Gundam game. Very little in between. The hype cycle for Gundam Evolution is quite interesting. First off, people often cite marketing as a reason that a title fails, but Gundam Evolution had active news cycles for a year before it even came out, and quite active betas as well. That means that Gundam Evolution wasn't struggling to be covered, especially by those serious about the project, or even those hyping it up for clicks. But nearly all of the positive words about the game were centered around it being a nice, fun alternative to Overwatch 1 and later Overwatch 2. Which was still nowhere in sight. And although Gundam Evolution, when covered by any major outlet, was almost always compared to Overwatch, there were some unique aspects about the game that should be mentioned. For example, it was faster paced, whether from the universal dash system or just the overall gameplay in general. Gundam Evolution also seemed to reward more individual play, which felt like it was a needed or wanted niche in hero shooters. Think of the reverse Heroes of the Storm effect. Gundam Evolution being a free-to-play title, however, would introduce some issues in the way of monetization and people's expectations of such. Gundam Evolution would launch on PC September 21st, 2022, nearly a year after it was playable in beta. The lengthy beta cycle could either have meant the game needed more time in the oven, or the time spent in the oven had paid off. Gundam Evolution would actually only be covered by a few websites, and they would collectively on aggregate review website Metacritic rate the game a 72 out of 100. Now we can speculate as to why so few major gaming outlets cover the game. For example, maybe most of them in their previews of the game felt that they already covered what the game was about, aka they knew what to expect and they didn't feel different. Or because Overwatch 2 was already looming over the just launched Gundam title, set to launch the following month. In the Gamer's review of Gundam Evolution, they rated it a 2.5 out of 5 stars and also stated that, "Look, I get it. Bandai wanted you to choose fashion over function, and I'm all for playing for vibes, and focusing on playing with your favorite mecha does sound like the right move in theory. But in the game's current shape, you can't make the right call when you try to form an efficient party, as a consequence of the lack of categorization among the many playable characters. Translation, it's hard to build a team comp. Ultimately, Gundam Evolution fulfills the promise of letting you impersonate one of the many mobile suits that have been showcased across the decades, and fans of the beloved series will have the time of their lives, at least for a bit. But in doing so, it just presents another attempt to emulate the Overwatch formula that doesn't quite hit the mark." Noisy Pixel was quite a bit nicer in their review, rating the game a 7.5 out of 10. Their review summed up Gundam Evolution as, "It plays exactly how you'd expect it if you've played any other game in its genre, and all of its monetization, and let's be clear, there is a lot of it, could have been softened with a few fundamental changes. It would be cool if the premium suits were also unlockable through the battle pass, for example through the premium track that would give you some currency back. I was left wishing that the loot boxes were given more frequently or were slightly more generous with rare items. There's a good game here to sink your time into, and I look forward to doing so. I just wish Bandai Namco had poured a little bit more special sauce onto it to differentiate it from the pack. There's a ton of potential with a property as massive as Gundam, and I can't help yearning for a game that did little more than just meeting my expectations." Noisy Pixel seemed to see more of the potential in Gundam Evolution than most, but I'm actually going to agree with them. I think had Gundam Evolution had more Gundam unique parts to it, it could have set itself apart much better. For starters, it had next to no story for the game, including leveraging the actual story of the characters selected. Even Overwatch technically kind of has story, right? Gundam, on the other hand, has entire animes dedicated to story. They could have started with one of the compelling narratives that they borrowed from one of its 10 plus animes and used it to serve as a jump off point for players to become invested in older new characters in a ever evolving story. Instead, it launched with 12 mobile suits with a few behind a paywall as a free-to-play player. The frustration comes from the fact that the game was pretending to be a competitive game. No, seriously, it had a legitimate competitive scene even early on. This led to complaints about balancing, the structure of the games, monetization, and more. Mobile suits like Barbados struck fear into many players' hearts, as not only were they not used to playing against this character, or as him, he was particularly strong at abusing new players and their mistakes. This made calls of pay to win quite common, and one of the biggest complaints that I got when asking for feedback. Gundam Evolution's focus on being a competitive game is oddly similar to Overwatch's weird focus on such. The only difference was that Gundam Evolution was being called it from the jump, and also called an Overwatch clone. So then why did Bandai Namco seem intent on making the same mistakes? They also lacked any sort of buy-in on their characters and story, unless players had already seen the anime, which just limits your audience. Overwatch 2 would launch shortly after Gundam Evolution, and the peak population on Steam would plummet from an impressive 55,437 players to just 19,377. While this wasn't solely because of Overwatch 2's launch, it can't be denied that it played a large part in such. In making the game too similar to Overwatch, they immediately place a absurdly high standard on the game, while also giving players little reason to not just return to the actual original game when it launches, or in this case, launches a sequel. Combine this with the previous reasons I and other multiple outlets mention, and Gundam Evolution's numbers just weren't doing so hot. Gundam Evolution would launch on consoles December 1st, 2022, a few months after its PC launch. The delay between the two might seem strange, but since the game wouldn't actually have crossplay, and the audiences were being treated as separate ones, it wasn't that strange. Not that not having crossplay in 2023, or in this case, the end of 2022, wasn't strange. As such, it's actually hard to track the success of the console launch of Gundam Evolution. With the console launch would be the launch of Season 2. Season 2 would introduce a new unit, the new Gundam, a new map, the colony trading posts, 170 new custom items, the ability to change your name, and some more custom match functionalities, only on PC though. Spectator mode, coaching functions, timeout functions, and a room ID change function. Many of these features and aspects felt a bit strange to be seen in a major season patch, considering they were basically quality of life changes arguably needed pre-launch. However, Season 2 in my eyes was a pretty beefy and successful update. Season 3 as an update for me is a clear public sign that the game was hurting. It's not only far less content-packed than the previous season, it feels like they were selling weeklies and dailies like something worthy of bragging about, which tells me that they didn't have that much to brag about. By this point on Steam, the population had dropped off of a cliff at only 1,500 players peak by the launch of Season 3, though it would rebound slightly up to 1,880 players in March. Bandai Namco would couple this momentum with their 6-month anniversary Season 4 update, which would feature some actual content, including new events, 2 new unit skins, and the Ballista Gundam suit. Something worth mentioning is that Bandai is known for having Day 1 DLCs, or DLC available basically at launch. And based on the quarterly update cycles, players felt like either Bandai had pre-cooked the content being released, or was trying to cook it at a feverish pace. Both would carry serious consequences. The population would jump up to 1,900 players by the spring of 2023, going into the summer. Gundam Evolution might not have been the roaring success that Bandai Namco seemingly was the only one expecting, but it was still chugging along. Problems and all, there was something unmistakably fun about the game. Within just a few months, however, the population had only continued to drop, now sub 1,000 players peak, and suddenly all the steam had left the mobile suit. By the summer of 2023, less than a year after launch, Bandai Namco would throw in the towel and announce the shutdown for Gundam Evolution on all platforms, set for November 29th, later in the year. Bandai would apologize to players, but in typical corporate fashion, would give a total non-apology and no reason detailed for why, which to me quite clearly communicates one thing. Bandai Namco had seen Gundam Evolution as a failure. I could understand this more if it wasn't a consistent plan of failure for Banco, who can't seem to find a way to make money with the Gundam franchise in the West. It's hard for me to feel sorry for them there. I had some thoughts that I wanted to lay out before we got to the final deduction. I'm going to go against the grain a little bit here and say that I actually feel like Gundam Evolution was not the wasted time that everybody was saying. I actually think that there could have been a lot more value provided with the game. Had Bandai just taken their time with Gundam Evolution, focused more on storytelling with each of the mobile suits and the anime that they come from, and just starting the game story in general, they could have continued to milk the hero shooter genre while putting in very little effort by comparison to Overwatch. That's kind of the plan in my head. Had Gundam Evolution just tried to be the little brother of Overwatch and just picked up the runoffs, which are tremendous at this point, they could have actually found a big success. But I think that Bandai, instead of taking the subtle route or the slow route, maxed everything out as fast as possible in an attempt to make the maximum amount of money. In the end, they got a title that basically failed in under a year, that we don't even know how successful it was commercially. And anytime you don't know that with Japanese developers, it usually means it's not very good. This is a classic example of how the corpo approach of making money doesn't always apply to art, or in this case, video games, and how often they are known for straight up copying other business strategies and approaches, which is exactly what happened with Gundam Evolution and Overwatch. Sure, there are some fun and cool gameplay differences between the two, but on paper, Overwatch offers way more than Gundam Evolution ever could, especially with how fast Bandai was trying to turn the game into an esport for some reason. Gundam Evolution was never even given the time to blossom, facing an impossible task to unseat an already falling off of their throne title online game. Falling off their throne or not though, they're still a titan. That music means early or not, it's time to put this case to bed, detectives. Sorry about the bedtime puns and my dying voice. The game was over-monetized and just under-delivered. It was too similar to competition. It doesn't leverage the world or story in basically any way. There was no community. It seemed to learn little from Overwatch's mistakes. Now, Gundam Evolution might just be another footnote in the long-standing history of failed Western Gundam projects, especially given the fact that it was a hero shooter gimmick title. But I still think it's worth covering titles like this, not just because I love Gundam and I'm biased, but because it gives us an idea why Gundam isn't and hasn't worked as a series in gaming yet. and hopefully gives you more insight into Bandai Namco too, the ones responsible for such. The combination of these two hasn't made for the most success yet, at least not in the West. But as a Gundam fan searching for something redeeming to say to end this video, I'm still eagerly awaiting a proper Gundam title to come to the West. Call it delusion, nostalgia, or just my love for giant death-dealing robots, but I feel like Gundam is a franchise of the future. We just need to get one going in the present first. Thanks for watching.